Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Maniel, CEO of the experience agency D Flash. Each week on the show, I bring a different business leader who's doing some game-changing work. And if you listen to the show, you know I love all things drinks and alcohol related. So I am so excited to have Anya Fernald, who is the co-founder of Belcampo and Copalli rum. I'm going to talk about her role as being an incredible female founder, how she decided to go into Belize and start an amazing new rum company. It's a phenomenal conversation. Take a listen. Hey, Anya.
Hi there, Laura. How's it going?
Oh, just hanging out forever inside. Missing my office, the usual.
Yep. Yeah. I went back to my office 2 weeks ago for a couple days, and I did one day this week, and I've decided actually energetically I've moved beyond my office. Like I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like it was a struggle for me to work at home. And as a boss, I was always really, question people working from home because I was not capable of doing it until I was forced to do it in COVID. And now I'm like, I feel more productive at home. So my whole worldview around working from home has shifted.
Ah, I don't know. I mean, for me, I miss my office. I sort of miss the energy of just sort of being around other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that I have gotten a lot more done once I finally gave in and gave myself like the permission to work from home and not watch lots and lots of television. So,
Okay.
so it came in handy. But as you know, even though the world is going upside down, the podcast does not change, and the first question doesn't
Okay.
change. So, Anya, what was your first job?
I delivered newspapers when I was 12 on my bicycle.
So you were a paper girl?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Back when that was the thing. People used to deliver newspapers on the bicycle. And my most significant memory of that job is being flashed, which was also a thing that I don't think people do anymore, right?
Well,
Like,
so this is a an interesting correlation. So my company, the day job, is called D Flash. The reason why it's called D Flash, and our original name was Digital Flash, but we shrunk it to get rid of the word digital a few years ago, but was because we got flashed by a dude in New York City in 2009.
okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day, and I'm like, do people flash anymore? I think there's new ways to get that gratification, right?
People do
But
all
yeah,
airdrop dirty pictures.
that's what it is. Exactly. I was like, there's a different thing now, but I remember being a paper girl and I remember getting flashed. And then I also around that time started my first little business, which was making and selling cookies at tailgate games.
So the right product for the right audience at the right time, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Drunk people want cookies.
And you can make money. So
Yes.
see, there's always a correlation to the first job. So what you do now, I always see it.
Yes.
After the paper route, I'm assuming there was a few things between that and starting two really phenomenal companies. So what was that journey like?
So I'd always been intrigued by food and agriculture. I decided not to get a degree in ag because at the time there weren't any programs around kind of what I'd call alternative ag. It was all really mainstream conventional, working in agribusiness, which I knew wasn't of interest to me. So I got a liberal arts degree, but I had my sights set on something in food, in ag. And I graduated from college in 1999, so it was pretty early for that. And I was always working with my hands and very interested in food. And I started making bread. I got a job as a baker briefly. Actually, took a year off and worked as a baker, so not that brief. But I started to make cheese quickly after that, just because I was making breads and then using buttermilk and making my own buttermilk. And I became interested in cheese making. I ended up moving to Europe and working as a cheesemaker in 1999. So my first grown-up job was a development from that, where I was hired in Sicily. I was brought in on a visa to develop a marketing cooperative for a group of very artisan, old-fashioned cheesemakers in southeastern Sicily. So I moved there in 99, and I ended up staying in Italy until the beginning of 2006. And by the end of that time in Italy, I was the director of a microfinance fund for small scale food businesses that were coming into compliance with the European Union regulations on food production.
Wow. Okay. That typical path, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I feel like everyone's like, "Oh, you're such a badass." I'm like, "You should have seen me when I was 20. Like, I was nuts. I moved to Europe. I got myself a folding bicycle. I got a fellowship. I got $20,000. I didn't have any money, and so but I didn't have any debt from college because my parents' work gave me a half scholarship of any college I went to. My parents are professors, so I had half of it paid for. My parents would pay for the rest. So I didn't have any debt, but I didn't have any money. So I got a fellowship and I got 20 grand and moved abroad. And then I basically, from there on, my adventure began. But I literally moved to Europe with a carry-on suitcase. I landed in London and I bought a folding bicycle and I moved to Wales and I started making sheep cheese. So it was like, and it was like, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a computer. I had like a film camera. It was it. I mean,
this sounds like a movie.
It was insane. It was insane. I had so much chutzpah back then. And sometimes I like pull that forward, like sometimes now in my 40s, I'm pulling that forward, that energy. But I was just like, I was really, really curious about how food was made. I love health and wellness too. So I love being in the countryside. I'd grown up moving around a lot and traveling. I moved 18 places before I was 15. So my parents, for their careers were in motion a ton. So it's like I had a really, I just had a very adventurous mind. And the cool thing is now I traveled so much in that time of my life. I have everyone's like, oh, COVID's so hard, no travel. And I kind of got that all out of my system by the time I was 30.
You're like, I'm done with this. I don't need to go anywhere else. I have seen the world.
I have seen it. I have seen it all.
And so you're making sheep cheese, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
how does one make sheep cheese? Because now I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, it was, you coagulate the milk. I mean, it's getting up early, milking animals, and in that case, these are very traditional cheeses. So they're actually made unpasteurized when the milk was still warm from the mother's body. And so the unpasteurized milk, add the rennet to it, let it set, cut the curd with a big manual cheese knife. So it's like a giant whisk, but with knives on it. So you cut the curd with that and then slowly heat it and then drain it. And that's your sheep cheese. So it's fabulous and it was delicious. And I also, at that time, Laura, I was graduating from college in 99 and it was like the peak of the no fat everything. Do you remember that? Like everybody had no fat cookies and all this
and the Atkins diet and all that crap.
Yeah. So I was like that. I moved in the midst of no fat world to a very traditional diet and like eating a ton of cheese and bread and wine and beer and like just traditional kind of farmer food and stuff that was growing in the garden. And my health like radically improved. So it was a pretty cool moment for me. My mood improved dramatically, my health improved dramatically. And I was like, I don't want to go back. And my friends at the time were working at Arthur Andersen. I remember that was the thing. It was like, oh, I'm going to get a job.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm going to make $70,000 a year. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a moron, but I'm so happy with the choices that I made, because I ended up, doing well, coming out of it with I'd say the word would be like a value proposition. I had a really unique value proposition coming out of 7 years of working in Europe in small scale food. And it didn't immediately showcase how I was going to monetize, but now I've been able to monetize it in a way that's really interesting.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, absolutely. Basically when you're living with your actual food, you end up being healthier. It just is a thing. It's factually proven.
And the microbiome and the biodiversity of soil around you and things. So it was like a lot of, I also just think I just did a lot of growing up. I also remember that time being extremely lonely and crying and journaling. And, I didn't even have like a Walkman, so it was like a real test in myself. So I think that gave me a ton of strength, just kind of working through that stuff. I mean, keep in mind, I went there with like traveler's checks, it was a different time.
Oh my gosh, traveler's
So
checks. Oh,
yeah, I moved to
wow.
Italy and when the lira was still in. So it's like I feel like I'm not that old, but it seems like a long time ago in terms of how different tech was. Now I think if I'd done that now, I would have like a million Instagram followers. Like it's like such a
You'd be an
unique
influencer.
journey.
Oh my
But
gosh, you'd
the
be making millions
timing,
of dollars.
exactly. It's like such a different journey now, but I'm really appreciative and thankful that I did it in a time where I didn't do it at all for performance. I really did it for personal development. And I don't think I was thoughtful enough about what changed in my life for the better. Now I've actually reintegrated many of the things that I learned from that time, into my life, and I've gotten happier and better and more consistent and even and everything. But it's like I came back and I sort of ricocheted back into American life. And then probably 5 or 6 years later, sort of emerged and said, okay, how do I make things better for myself, all the time, through thinking about like what from that time in your life was solid. And so things like, and this sounds silly, but I eat cheese every day for breakfast. Like I eat a big chunk of like Parmesan raw milk cheese, or just some or like an American raw milk sheep cheese or something. Because
Really?
yeah, it's like I learned in that time, like I thrive on a lot of fat and protein, and that's what I'd have for breakfast there. I'd get up and have coffee and cheese. That's what she did. And then I came back to America and I kind of switched to the more standard American practice. And now in my 40s, I'm like, I kind of just want to eat Parmesan in the mornings, and I still do, and eat hard cheese. I mean, if I'm hungry, I'll eat that. So some funny things that I learned that time, which is like, I kind of try to go on protein and fat till like 2 or 3 in the afternoon if I can. And that's something I did then, and I've reintegrated into my life now.
Oh, we could talk about food all day long.
There you go.
Because I don't know about the cheese for breakfast. I feel like in COVID, I've reverted back to my childhood self, and I've become like a 5-year-old again. So like I'm having oatmeal for breakfast and a cup of tea and like a
Oh,
banana.
sweet.
And I'm like making, and not even doing like the instant oatmeal, like actually making oats as if I'm my mother all over again. um, because prior to COVID, I didn't eat breakfast. I just skipped it because I was trying this sort of intermediate fasting BS.
Oh, yeah.
And that didn't really work for me. And I find myself now like it's like comforting to like sit and like actually and watch TV, watch the news, and like have a cup of tea and oatmeal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I
Even
get
though
it.
it's not the healthiest, but that's what I'm doing.
I like it. I endorse it. Sounds good.
Okay, so we've made some amazing sheep cheese, and you come back out with all this really great stuff. Then what happens?
So I was living in Sicily at the time, and Sicily, it was a really neat place to live. I mean, you could like there's like figs growing on trees and pomegranates and great cheese and homemade everything. But from a work environment, especially as a young woman, it was very corrupt and intense, So of course it was like lots of sexual harassment, but that was sort of the minor issue. The bigger issue was that it was and my boss from that time, from that organization, is actually now in federal prison in
Oh my
Italy.
God.
So it wasn't just like my gut or me being kind of like biased against Sicilians.
This
It
is
was
your
definitely,
experience.
yeah, it's my experience. And at the time, it was like my first job, working through a big organization with a big budget, and doing work that I thought was meaningful, of helping small scale food producers comply with European Union laws and get their products exported. But there was like a bunch of little tells, indicators that this place was not totally on the up and up. And I was so naive, and I hadn't had a real job before, that I was like kind of put up with it for longer than I should have. And then at a certain point, I kind of got scared. They were asking me to do things, and then with the intention of not following through, and I said,
Oh
okay.
wow.
And so
You're like, nah, gotta go.
yeah, and that was just a great like kind of life lesson. It's like, if you got an instinct on things, get the heck out of there. And then I left, and I'd been in touch with an organization in northern Italy that hired me. And so I drove north and just moved to northern Italy, where I continued to work, sort of seamlessly. But and then I actually grew into this microfinance. I started with them in marketing, and then I took over this microfinance role, which is basically, we had money from the region of Tuscany, and I distributed that in the form of business loans to small scale food producers. So between 10 and 100,000 euros per group, in the form of a loan or a grant, to help them with marketing, business planning, etc.
Because you're a boss.
So yeah, that was a great sort of escalator for me. And, then I kind of realized, like, this is where I had to take a minute and say, okay, this is not where I want to like raise my children and have my life, because it's not a very entrepreneurial country, Italy. If you're born into a family business, you can do well with it, really. But it wasn't a place where I saw a lot of entrepreneurs. I saw a lot of movement, and I had to be smart about my own life and my own kind of legacy. So I moved back to the US with my then husband, Italian man who I'd met in Northern Italy in the second part of my time there.
This is
And
definitely a movie.
oh yeah. So we
This
moved back
such
to
a movie.
California, and then I started my first American business. And that was like, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I felt like, I also feel like women in Italy in careers, everyone sort of vaunts like how great it is that you get a year of paid maternity leave. But the problem I found is that you had this, like, because of that, you had this huge implicit bias against promotions and opportunities for women, because it was like, well, as soon as you have a baby, you're gone for a year and we have to pay you. So it was, as soon as you kind of got towards the window where look like you're going to have kids, all of a sudden you're getting a lot of slammed doors. So that to me was concerning. And I saw a number of women I work with like kind of hit that ceiling pretty hard. So I felt like it was time to go for a lot of reasons. I just wasn't going to get the kind of advancement that I wanted in Italy.
Wow. So you make the leap to come back.
Mm-hmm. And I started working. I literally stopped my job in Italy on Friday, and I started my job on Monday in America.
Everyone does.
I was like hard driving in those times. Now I feel like I don't work, like the way I used to.
You work better now.
Yeah, I work better. I like being older. I'm not as frenetic. So I got a job working for a nonprofit to start a business for them, which is kind of what I'd done in Italy, like working in the sort of social venture businesses, building a produce company that sold produce from small scale farmers to large institutions. So I landed like Kaiser Permanente, which is a large West Coast healthcare provider, and a number of other kind of like Veterans Hospital, Blue Cross. We were selling from super high quality, mostly minority owned, like Southeast Asian owned farms here in California into large scale healthcare networks. And it was a great little business. And we ended up selling that. I then I started ran a big food event that gave me a lot of notoriety. And from there, I started my own consulting company as well as an events company that I also later sold. So it's kind of been like a serial entrepreneurship journey in that time of my life, over those kind of like 5 years. And I started consulting because it's like after I did this big event in 2008, it was like I was in a lot of magazines for having pulled off this really surprisingly successful large thing. And the CEO of Whole Foods at the time, he's no longer there, but he called me and he's like, you're really talented. You could do a lot, and you should consider like being a CEO of something. And so that was like a boost. And another of my big kind of mentors, just like not a formal mentorship, but reached out at the time and said something similar. And I'm like, okay, Anya, like think bigger. It doesn't have to be a social venture purely. It doesn't have to be nonprofit to be worth your time. It can be something that's, like the world was changing and I knew I wanted to be in pole position for what the next thing was. So I started my consulting company, which was a huge amount of hustle and my first like truly outright owned for-profit venture. And then I started my events company as well. And that was in 2008, both of those. And my consulting company, I started knowing I was going to like just use it as a springboard to launch my next venture, to actually like get my next thing going. Mm-hmm. And it ended up doing that. Within a year, one of my clients who became my business partner reached out and had a project to work with me on, which was to develop kind of a business around properties that he owned in Belize in California. And this was, the kind of the gist of that, the outcome of that was Belcampo and Copalli. So after a few years of consulting for him, he said basically, listen, I'll fund this company if you'll step in as CEO. And that was 8 years ago. So I'm just still plowing up that hill.
Wow. And I think it's so fascinating, and one of the reasons I was so psyched to have you on the show, because I think it's rare to find a female founder who successfully owned multiple businesses, exited those businesses, and then undone other things and still keep moving the ball forward. Because I think oftentimes as female entrepreneurs, like, okay, if I do this one thing, I've got to keep doing it for the next 20 years, even if it kills me, versus knowing when this is in a good place, I can sell this and then go do something else. Like,
Yeah, I think that moving through things is something that is a like a gift for me. And I think it originates just in childhood from moving a ton. Like literally my parents uprooted and moved house a bunch of times. And I became, in some ways I'm like overly functional at being detached. Like right? Like it's definitely a
so
challenge
good.
for me. That I'm extremely good at compartmentalizing and extremely good at like detaching from emotionality on things and really like being like, okay, let me look at this intellectually and take a step back. Because keep in mind, like I moved, when I was 6, and then when I was 8, and then I was 9, and then 11, like constantly uprooting relationships and moving forward. So sometimes I think my learning now has been a little bit about slowing down, but I think at times some healthy detachment around your business isn't yourself, you know, and, I had this feeling in the past week. It's like with Belcampo, yesterday I basically inked a massive deal that's going to increase our revenues by like 40-50% next year. And it was a great feeling, but it wasn't like over the top, ecstasy, right? It was like, cool,
Hmm.
that's great. And then there's
Hmm.
a sense of like, okay, Anya, this is a brand. You built the brand. You did it. You built a raw meat brand. Nobody thought there could be a sexy, cool brand in raw meat. You did it. Give yourself a gold star. And then
Pat
like
yourself in
do
the back.
something fun, like figure out the next thing. Like my whole energy was like, oh, this is behind me now. And it's not like in a bad way. It's like you did what you set out to do. And that ability to generate and to build is something really special that I have. But it's also like, that's cool. Like you can do the next thing. And I, at the same time, was talking to a big branding agency that's effectively going to take over a lot of the stuff that I do for the company now. And I'm like, when can you guys start? Like there was like,
I'm out.
well, it was funny. I was just thinking, I'm like, okay, so this means you're going to be doing way less of this ideation, way less of this and that. And I'm thinking, and that's pretty great, because that takes a lot of your time. And it's not that, and I love it, but like there's a lot of my love that I can put on other things, which is really great. So it's like it's important to not hold on to things. It's also important, I think, to look at when things are at a peak for yourself and when your optimal value add is peaking, and then keep pivoting towards ways where you can continue to add the most value,
Well, yeah,
and not try to
that's so
hold
key.
on too much. Like I see that struggle in people on my team, like, oh, I'm going to hold on to this. I'm going to hold on to that, hold on to this. And I'm not going to give you a piece of this. I mean, so many interpersonal dynamics at work are about like, well, this is my territory. I'm going to go kvetch to that person about how I didn't get this piece of that. And that was my idea. And it's like, oh, just let all that behind you. Just leave all that behind you. There's just like, there's no wins in any of that stuff. There's just no wins.
And it's so refreshing to talk to you, because I think that, this is a thing with entrepreneurs where, letting go of the things that you don't need to do or don't serve the growth and thriving of your business. Like, you don't have to do the accounting, or you don't have to do the branding. You can take it to a point and then, okay, we can now have the branding agency come in and do this, and I can go do other things. I can be the face. I can like work on operations. And I think that's such a hard lesson for entrepreneurs. I know myself, but like it's recently for me where it's just like, okay, I don't need to do all these little things anymore. Like, I have a staff that I trust, or we outsource that, and there are other things I can do that can help make our company thrive. And it's hard to kind of get to that point where you are able to sort of let go of, I guess kind of like the leash you have on the company.
Well, so I think about it a different way too. Like if you're fear motivated, you can also contextualize it to yourself. It's like, if I don't let these things go, then I will be either pushed out by failure, or I'll be pushed out by my capital partner, right? Or my VC or my whatever. Like this is a typical kind of founder's journey. So from my perspective too, it's like there's two drivers. One is like nobody I am in the 99th percentile in creativity and brand and marketing and in product and innovation, right? Those are like 99th percentile. I'm like 75th percentile for like a lot of other things. maybe like 80th for a couple of things, right? But like, look at the things that you're in the 99th percentile for and just focus it on that, right? And I think because that's where you can actually add the most. And then realize if you don't let yourself focus on that, your failure at the other things will effectively diminish your company's valuation and potential, right? Or your failure at the other things will cause people in your organization to resent and underperform, or cause your leadership and your money to demand that you step away, right? So it's actually functional for your survival and thriving. I just think it's like it's just being rational and mathematical about it. It's like, what am I the very best at? How do I do mostly those things, and go from there?
That's the key part about this. So tell me more about Belcampo, because obviously we're in this, everyone should be going vegan, and you shouldn't, you can't eat anything that tastes good anymore. How are you guys surviving and thriving, especially now in COVID with Belcampo? And then we'll talk about my favorite topic, rum.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So briefly, Belcampo is indeed thriving right now. I mean, our revenues are up significantly year on year. Our restaurants are actually growing year on year. And most of the restaurant category, as you know, is down like 70 or 80% year on year. So it's a pretty spectacular performance. And it has to do with our brand's support of wellness. So we are a meat company, right? We sell meat, but we sell really, really healthy, high quality meat. So who I appeal to are the people who see, I think correctly, meat as a health food, meat as the perfect food. So I appeal to kind of two major segments. One is like health gonzos, and I kind of put myself in that category of like loving health and wellness and being really into cooking and making great quality food for myself and my family. So the health gonzos who also are a fan of animal protein, that's who I really appeal to. And the other piece is to kind of the person looking to still eat meat and ameliorate the negative environmental impacts of it. And that is something I do because our meat is actually carbon positive.
Wow. And how do you guys get to be carbon positive?
It's regeneratively farmed. So we don't till the ranch land, and we only feed them naturally growing grass. So they just forage naturally. So we've had third-party testing done since 2013, and all of our grasslands are actively sequestering carbon.
Wow. And it's funny because, like, you would think now with COVID, people would be like, wait, I'm going to eat healthier. And you're like, but now you can actually make smarter choices about the types of foods you put in your body. And do you think that's part of the reason why you guys are doing so well now?
I also think the whole like meat supply crisis got people really, really paying attention for the first time in a long time to where their food came from, where their meat came from. So I think that's kind of part of it. I think it's also a question of just I have a lot of my demographic is young women who have had health issues around veganism, like bloating, gaining weight, losing their periods, anemia, low energy, lethargy. The story about the vegan who all of a sudden had to start taking naps, right? So there's the major issue there. So you get that's like that type of a person is a big client base for me. I was a vegetarian for 9 years, and I've never been kind of more inflamed, honestly. Constantly had issues with like flaking skin and flaking nails and split ends and UTIs and yeast infections. Like all the lady shit happened to me all the time. Plus like struggling with depression and anxiety, and started eating meat, and those problems went away. Right. So that's not like I say sample size of one, but I've lived that. And a lot of women have lived that as well. They become vegans. They start to suffer from anxiety. They have just troubles with focus and concentration and energy levels. So a lot of the Belcampo follower people who are like, listen, I don't eat a lot of meat, but but I kind of have to, because otherwise I feel crummy. And when I do eat it, I want it to be really something that is great for the planet.
Awesome. So, and yeah, it's funny because I find myself, I'm eating, I think making much better choices about the stuff that I eat now because I'm home and I'm cooking so much. I think it's also part of it. As opposed to like, when you're on the go and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna pop in here and pop in there. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's like, I tried to be vegan for like a week and it almost killed me. So not gonna work for me, but I understand why some folks might need it.
Yeah, but the reason that you might want to be vegan are really compelling. If you only have access to confinement meat, it's terrible for the environment, and it's actually not good for you either, right? So there's varying opinions. Some people are like, meat at whatever cost. Okay, I'm not in that camp. If I can't get meat of Belcampo quality, I will just not eat meat for a couple of days, and I'll be fine, right? But if you do thrive on meat and you want to do the right thing by the environment and by yourself and by animal happiness, we offer a choice. We offer you a choice, right? Like something you can believe in. So
you actually will believe in it. And now I'd love for you to share the story of Copalli. So full disclosure to our audience, I got to meet Anya through a really incredible tasting event that I went to via Zoom, through some amazing friends, and got to hear the story of how Anya created Copalli rum and all the amazing things she does around it. And first, I think I have to say, it's such good rum.
yay! That's what I want to hear.
I guess someone who's
awesome.
Jamaican and was raised on Ray and Nephew, it
Yay.
is a close second, because I think I'll get struck by lightning if I say it's better. So it's a close second.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna lose your passport.
Seriously, my parents would disown me. But that being said, I just love everything that you're doing with Copalli. So I'd love for you to kind of tell the origin story of it.
Absolutely. So my business partner had bought land in Belize as a conservation investment starting in the early 2000s. He had also bought a little fishing lodge there. I took over management of that property in, I think, 2011. And the idea was initially to kind of like make this hotel nicer and cooler, and then eventually figure out some type of a business you could do off of the distillery or the land itself. So I looked at a lot of different options there, and distillation seemed to be the most interesting because of the premium you can charge for it. The challenge was that it's the whole reason that he bought the land, and the whole impulse of the business was around sustainability. And so distilleries are notoriously poor actors in terms of environmental quality. So I got a real lesson in that time in working in Central American countries, because I set out to build a distillery that would be zero impact. I mean, honestly, working in any country, but in a country that is unaccustomed to sort of larger scale development like Belize, it was just, I really, really learned to slow down and the importance of just patience and perseverance. I started building the distillery in 2012 and didn't finish until 2016. It was supposed to take 1 year, it took 4 years.
Of course. Why would it take the same amount of time?
I put I still have it in my closet, although now it's covered with clothes, thank God, because I don't need to see it anymore. But I had a big sign up that said, persistence is fruitful. It was like, that's what it was like. Just endless stuff would happen. It was like 22 inches of rain in a day. And then all the concrete had to be like repoured, because in Belize, to limit the offshore building, they don't allow you to import concrete that hardens underwater. So we'd have to use dry hardening concrete. So all the pilings and foundational work of the distillery. So it was a lot to handle. And there were some mistakes we made too. It took a lot longer, it cost more, it was more complex. But the beauty of it is that it's like very much of that place now. There's a huge amount of pride. We're the biggest employer in southernmost Belize. And then the business is also actively involved in supporting women's causes locally. And that goes from like, we have a large number of female employees in the distillery. And then we actually have a philanthropy program with local schools to support women's education, so high school education, which costs money in Belize, and typically not many girls go. So it's been a really great experience for me in terms of getting the thing up and running. I'll be really honest that I am not a big spirits drinker. I'm just kind of like genetically a lightweight. I can drink wine, but spirits, I can't. I get like almost like a physical response to it. But I love the taste of rum. And so what I focus on is kind of like the connoisseurship for me. Actually, I gotta say now, that used to be true. Now with Copalli in action, I can put away 2 rum cocktails and be fine. But I'd say I didn't come at it from like oh my God, I want a rum business. It was like, oh my God, I want to do something amazing for this country that's sustainable at its core, that I can be deeply proud of. And that's what Copalli is.
Awesome. I think that's the thing that's so incredible. Is that, like, when you start out with like, I want to do something good, good ends up coming out of that. As opposed to coming with a previous agenda about what it has to be versus like, all right, we're gonna see what's here, and make the best possible product that makes the best sense for doing right by the people who are here. And that's how you end up with such a great product. The thing I've noticed about the rum is that it is remarkably smooth. Why is that?
It's made from fresh sugar cane, and it's distilled like, I think 11 or 12 times in the distillation process we have. So it's a multiple distillation processes, right? Because we use both a column still and a pot still, and we blend those 2 types together. So I think it's the multiple distillations. It's also rested. The barrel rested product and the white rested product. The white product are both rested, which allows that like smoothness to come out and some of the more kind of particular kind of edges on it to soften out.
Yeah, because I like I said, I mean, obviously I've been drinking rum my entire life because Jamaicans.
Yeah.
But
Well, my favorite thing to do with our rum too, we don't make a spice product, but I have a mason jar of it in my pantry where I just I take the white or the barrel, and I throw cinnamon sticks, a whole nutmeg, a little orange peel, lemon peel, a little bit of coconut sugar. Oh my God. I'll serve that like at the end of any dinner with cake or whatever my dessert is. It is so good. You can just make the best simple infused natural spiced rum out of our product. And it really, some of that like natural smoothness, it's like a beautiful, just like little aperitivo. So good.
Have you been to my parents' house or something? Because that's literally what we do.
Did you guys do that? I thought I invented it. Of course you invented it. Yeah. No, that's like, I love it. And it's got like my mason jar. It's like, I always have eyes on it. Like if I'm like, during the week, I'm all, that jar looks really good. It's so good. And I put star anise in there too recently.
Of course.
Just a bunch of stuff, and it's intense.
A little bit of ginger.
Exactly. And then you can just add more rum as you go and throw more spices in.
Exactly. Because
the other thing that's really cool is this dish, do you ever make rum top? That's a European thing with rum where you just take peaches and plums and put like kind of like fruit that's sort of end of its life, but in just fresh. I mean, we're in the right season for it, like the end of the summer kind of stone fruit. And put it in a big mason jar, and you pour rum, but every layer, put some coconut sugar in between it, put a vanilla bean in there, and then pour a bottle of rum over it. That is so good. You leave it to macerate for like a month, and it's like fruit preserved in rum.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
What?
So good. That's how I like alcohol. It's like, I like to make spice. I like a little bit, but like with the thing, oh my God, it's my favorite.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's 2 things with me and rum. So obviously for Christmas every year we do Jamaican fruit cake. And so basically you essentially put a half or 3/4 of a bottle of rum in it, along with Manischewitz wine. And then the reason why the cake will last is that you just sprinkle rum on top of it. Yeah. So I discovered that actually this also works for rum and raisin ice cream. So if you ever go to any ice creams like Haagen-Dazs or Van Leeuwen, and you get the rum and raisin ice cream, you stick it in the freezer. But before you stick it in the freezer, get whatever white rum you have and sprinkle the white rum on top, and then close it and then put it in the freezer. When you take it out, oh my God, it's so good. Like it's as if like it's like you're having a frozen rum ball. It cannot go wrong. But yes, I digress.
That sounds amazing. Amazing.
Because it's like, I'm like, yeah, because it just seeps into the bottom of it, and then it's frozen, so it's even better.
Yeah. Yeah. I also just did a recipe for our company that's like a pumpkin spice cake. I'll send you this recipe. It's so good, but it's actually totally sugar free. It's a keto cake. But so if you make some like with nut flour, and it can be quite like dense and spongy, a little dry. So then I like undo the ketoness of it by soaking that in rum. But like any kind of like dry or leftover cake, just pour
Yeah.
rum or rum syrup on it, and
Oh, of
it's
course.
so good. It's like you don't have to throw that away. It's like good for one more dessert.
No, that's like a from for as long as I can remember. That's the thing. If anything, any cake that you have or any sort of pastry that might even be going a little bit hard, you sprinkle a little bit of rum on it, all of a sudden it just sort of pops back to life, and then it
Exactly.
now has a rum flavor. So these things are all
Exactly.
good.
There you go.
We could talk about rum for way too long. So, looking back on all the things that you've done, what do you think you'd tell 25-year-old Anya?
Let me think. Just to not take things personally. You're your own worst enemy if you take things too heavily and too emotionally. Don't be like, I don't care, whatever, nothing matters. That's a bad idea. But just keep it light and don't get overly worked up about things. Because if you stay focused on staying in your lane and achieving against your stuff, don't let people walk all over or take credit for your work and just put your head down and get it all done all the time. I think that some women do that. But I also see, particularly in women, a tendency to spend time worrying about like, oh my God, there's, this happened, this person doesn't like me, the sort of the psychodynamics of things. And that's a waste of time, and
For sure.
that's like, yeah, I even think about that in relationship, like about men. I'm like, like anytime I spent worrying about, it's hard to get yourself out of that obsessive thought loop sometimes, right, in relationship. And it is with work too. You obsess about that boss who's a little dick, or that person who, is taking credit for your work. But it's like every minute you spend thinking about them is 1 minute you could spend working on yourself. So a practice that I've adopted more recently in my life, in the past 3 years, I've done a huge amount of self work. Okay. So that means like I started doing therapy. I went to do a Hoffman process, which is like 90 hours of therapy in a week. I started doing breath work. I took a bunch of steps to say, okay, what's the next 40 years of my life? How do I make them as happy as possible? And in that time, what I learned about myself is that, yeah, I still do have obsessive thought. I still do get resent. It's all there, but I now have some physical tools that help me break through it and get into more positive patterns. So that's something I wish I had done a lot earlier. And I think I don't resent like not doing a lot of self-work in my 20s, because probably my buried pain helped me muscle through a lot, and
Right.
and I always thought I was like, well, my trauma is terrific because it makes me work like a badass. Well, okay, but then there was a time where I didn't just
Not
want
so
to work,
much.
like,
Right.
and so I would just be like, it's functional because look at how hard I work, and look at like how I can look at my willpower. Like that trauma, it helps me. And God bless, I don't have like real trauma, so everything's relative. Right. But I do think there's a, you don't learn enough as a young person that you can actually do some things physically that unlock your mental ability to be more calm and present. You can learn a breathing routine that will take you out of a pattern of obsessive thought. You can develop a mantra and don't get it from like an Instagram side, no disrespect, but like you can develop some practices. And it's also like journaling doesn't really work for me. It never did. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. There are other things that do, and so like right now I've had a morning where I've been on Zooms and on and off since like, it's been about 5 hours straight. I've got another 4 hours this afternoon. I'm going to take half an hour right now and blast music in my kitchen, and I'm going to roast fennel and bake cake. That's my plan after this call. And that's the kind of thing I've planned out since this morning, because I know that gets me out of my head. I
Right.
will dance with my daughter, and I'll have like a minute. And that's like, and I didn't used to book that kind of thing in my day. And it's not even about being at home now. Like I didn't used to book anything like that in my day ever. And that's kind of my growth now, is like, you know what, Anya, you'll crush it on those meetings that afternoon if you've had that minute to yourself. And then the same thing goes, I woke up this morning and I was, annoyed at my boyfriend about something. And I was like, I did my like little breathing thing and I stopped thinking about it. And then, I talked to him about it, and then it's fine. It's like, but there's just patterns that I've been able to break that plagued me. And I'm like, wow, I wish I'd learned these tools earlier. So that's one thing I just think. It's like, I wish I'd gotten my head around some of these like physical things that I can do that just help me unlock a little bit more potential, a little bit more ease, like that you don't need to be that, that sort of high strung about things sometimes. And there's no wins in obsessive thought. And I mean, speaking also of my own kind of my own weaknesses and my own traumas, right? And I also think too, I am very ambitious, okay? And I've always wanted to be a boss. I've always wanted to make money. I've always wanted to change the world. I've always wanted to be well known in some circle, not like in a famous way, but like I want to be respected. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of deep fear that drives that fear of, failure, fear of poverty, fear of, a lot of fear, right? So it's like there's that ambition, and there's the whatever, and other people have different, some people have shame that drives ambition. Some people have, there's a million reasons, narcissism that drives ambition. There's a lot of, I know my own patterns around that. But it's also like, I think as a woman being very ambitious, it's not really, at least in my generation, seen as being really awesome. And I now know that being courageous is my superpower, and being ambitious like this is what drives it. And to embrace that a little bit more and say, it's cool. Not everybody has that. It's not a super feminine characteristic, but it's okay. Like if you are a very ambitious woman, to just sort of like live with that conflict, live with that unusualness, and not be worried as much like I was when I was younger about kind of masking it under like a sense of like, oh no, it's cool if I don't get promoted. I don't really care about my salary. It's like, no, I do, and it's not cool. Right. So to be a little bit more comfortable with ambition, I think, especially for younger women, is a good thing to embrace. So you don't unnecessarily mask it and then don't achieve what you want because you didn't ask for it, I went all over the map with that one.
Well, it's funny because you answered like 3 questions I was going to ask. Right? So, sounds like someone listens to the podcast. Because my next question was going to be, what do you do for your self-care? But I think you answered that.
Yeah, a lot of breathing. I do ice baths. Ice baths, breathing, heavy weights, and eating really, really good.
Roasted fennel, and what kind of cake are you making?
I'm making a pumpkin spice cake with almond flour and monk fruit.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I haven't gotten back into baking. I was early on in the quarantine because I'm a much better baker than I am a cook. Mm-hmm. And so I was like doing all kinds of cakes and cookies and croissants, and I got an air fryer and make beignets. I even like did rum spiked beignets early on because why not? But I don't think I haven't baked anything in a couple of months now because I was just like, yeah, whatever.
It's dangerous to have a bunch of baked goods around the house. It's like tempting. Yeah. It's like a lot of stuff. But I make keto baked goods to have around when I'm craving sugar and sweets. So that's like good. Yeah. And then it's also nice to for me, the manuality of cooking is really relaxing, so.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. I think the step-by-step nature of it, like I remember when I was getting like kind of the meal preps of like Blue Apron and HelloFresh when quarantine, it was very calming for me to like simply follow the steps and like not have to think about the world. Like, no, I'm just gonna read the instructions and okay, add this much. Okay, I'll cut this onion. Okay, cool. And like that regimentedness was actually really needed for me during when everything was like going straight to hell. Where I'm like, oh my God, my business just went off a cliff.
Yeah, exactly. Everything I built. I know. The first week of quarantine, it was like fire 300 people. My childcare support was continually sick, which at that time I was terrified about. Now I'm much more casual, but like low fever, my nanny has low fever. My kids' schools are shut. I have to shut, 4 restaurants down and fire 300 people. It was like, OMG. So that was a real moment where I was like, literally remember I'd be like, you know what, kids, I'm going to make you fresh guacamole and fry tortilla chips, like fry my own tortilla chips for lunch. And I was
Oh my
like,
God.
and my kids, and I'm like missing all the Zooms for my children's schools are texting me like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not effing
Nope,
okay.
nope, no.
Not okay. See ya. Maybe never. And I'm like, my kids are fine. They're totally smart. We're eating some tortilla chips right now. Just leave me alone. But it was really funny. My priorities gravitated towards some of these like kind of self-care things. You know, I'm like, I'm going to make a complicated recipe for lunch, like under the aegis of making lunch for my children.
No, of
It's good
course.
times.
That's like the best excuse. You go, oh yeah, it's for the kids. It's not me. I have to
Yeah.
do this because the kids need it.
They
That's
want
all.
guacamole, and I don't think you can buy guacamole. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Why would you buy it? No, never. It's got COVID. I can make it here. Yep.
Exactly.
But the thing is, and I think that's just so wonderful, is that we are resilient and we bounce back. And I think you know your story is just so important because it's such a different founder story, and I just had an idea that I'll tell you offline. um, um, because I think it's you're a rarity in our industry, and in terms of a female founder who's just like, yep, I will unapologetically tell you, like, I like money. I want to do good stuff. I want people to know who the hell I am. Like, this is a good thing. And I mean, I ascribe to the exact same thing, like full stop. And I wish more female founders, and especially young women in business, like had this gene or turned this gene on, because we probably all have it. You just don't turn it on. Because it would save you a lot of heartache and agony if like you just sort of knew, like, yeah, I'm going to figure this thing out no matter what. And here we are 7 months later. You guys are killing it. Our business is booming, and I think that's just a testament to not giving up, but also sort of running through walls because you can make it through.
Yeah, and it's also the kind of embracing ambition. It's just not seeing it as an ugly thing, and it's like sort of like the same way as not seeing it's the same coin. Another side of the same coin is not seeing failure as an ugly thing. I can tell you the number of businesses, things, and bad ideas I've had and failures I've had. Probably right now I have 70 products in my company. I probably launched 100 that aren't there anymore. It's like the story is my list of failures is longer than my list of successes. And it's like the only reason I'm here today is I just walked right through those. Didn't minimize them. If you ask me about them, I'll tell you all about every one of them, but I don't dwell on them. And I also, frankly, don't dwell on my successes. It's like, I'm not going to be like, oh man, I landed this great contract yesterday. I'm going to think about that some more. It's like, cool, that happened. What's now? Like, I'm working on R&Ding a new bone broth right now. I'm really excited about that. Let's think about that. Like, that's cool. Let's focus on that, right? Let's like focus on the next thing, keep moving through. And that's what momentum is. That's the thrill of it. The momentum too, and the beauty about life is that it's never about the destination. It's always the journey, right? So if you get fixated like, oh, I'm going to be happy when this happens, typically, I mean, all the research about this shows that you get there and you're unhappy because the actual fun of it is the journey towards the goal. It's not the goal. So for me, landing this big contract yesterday, I'm like, I'm not very happy. I mean, I'm stoked and I celebrated my own way. And like, I was like, cool, that was a really great meeting. But, I moved right on to the next 3 meetings that day. And then I, read the coolest thing for me was I got to read for like 2 hours last night. And I celebrated that because I'm like, God, I've had 2 kids in 8 years and it's been a long time since I've been able to read a book for 2 hours straight. That's really cool. It's a big moment. It's like, because remember that everything is about celebrating little moments in your day and never assuming that end goal is going to scratch the itch, right? So that's where I say it's like not getting too attached to the moment or to the destination, but like just focusing on the momentum and the flow as the source of gratification is going to yield a happier day-to-day from in my experience. Because I've been in those moments too, where I work towards the end and then the end happens and I'm like, well, that was kind of a disappointment, right? Laura, you've had that experience too. You're like, we did it. Cool. Right. So
Yeah.
if you coach yourself
like,
to
okay,
not be like,
yeah.
it's about that. Like, it's like, wow, it's really great to like, it's fun to work with a team on building the presentation, not like, oh my God, the presentation is going to land us the contract, and the contract, once we have that, life's going to be better because we're going to have more money. No, reality is you get more revenues, you get more problems, you need bigger systems. It's less fun, in bigger picture, it's like less fun, less interesting. But so focus on the pieces that are exciting about the journey towards the destination and keep looking for those pieces on an everyday basis, right? That's a more long-term approach, I think, to success.
Yeah, it really is the journey towards the destination that's so key, where you like, getting there is like, okay, when you get there, then what? Like I saw a really great quote a few months ago, and it was like, okay, so you got to the top of this mountain. Okay, well, that also means you're at the base of another mountain.
Yes.
So, like, celebrate that you got to this one, but then, like, now keep on climbing.
I mean,
So
how many people do you know? I know, I can think of 10 right now that like did the thing. They sold the company and then they're like unhappier than they've ever been.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I
I'm
feel
not
like, what
saying
the
like,
hell?
oh, because of that, I don't want to sell my company. And if anybody's listening who wants to buy a great meat company, no, but I'm just saying, it's like, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm not going to want to exit, right? That's not, or Copalli, right? That's not at all the point. It's just like, if you get too focused, I've seen so many people who get focused on that valuation, on that ticket, on that, like, I'm going to buy that boat or do that thing. And then they get there and it's actually, they enjoy the work. They enjoy building teams. They enjoy camaraderie. And so but you don't also want to work that hard, right? So if you find ways where you're like, what is about the process that I enjoy? So for me, I'm like, okay, I really enjoy the innovation process and I really enjoy building that. So how do I hold on to that? And what do I need to build in my life that allows me to keep on being that innovator? Okay, that's the ticket, not like, oh my gosh, when this company is worth X, whatever that dollar amount is in your head or my head for what the thing that we're doing is worth. Once I achieve that, then this will happen. That's a cul-de-sac. That's a cul-de-sac. You'll get the money and then you freak out. We've seen that happen to a million people. But if you start to think like, that'll be a great way to support this other thing that I'm really interested in doing, that's a more powerful path.
It's so remarkably true. Like, yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, so we've come to the last question, and and this one's an easy one. It's basically, do you have a give and or an ask of the audience? And this can be anything you want.
Oh,
So it could be anything from like buy Copalli rum with the Belcampo foods, or sleep. Like, you should all sleep. Whatever you want.
I don't know. I mean, I just say like the ask the audience is like, think today how you can nurture yourself.
Nice.
Kind of my thing, like just like something I try to think about, like that's been helpful for me.
I like that one. How do you nurture
Okay.
yourself? Like, that's a really good one.
Yeah, just like challenges. I think if there's more people nurturing themselves and giving themselves love and nurturing their own love and building themselves, it's going to be a happier universe, and we have less conflict. So I just think it's like the goal is like, how do you nurture yourself? How do you take care of yourself? How do you build your love?
I love that one. Well, thank you so much, Anya. Well,
Thank
Anya,
you.
it's been such a delight having you on the show. I mean, we could just keep on chatting about my favorite topic, meat and rum. I mean, come on.
Let's go.
They go together. And I'll put all of the information in the show notes about where you can get Belcampo and where you can get Copalli rum, because they are both delicious.
Awesome.
And to find more about all of the really cool endeavors that Anya is doing, we'll put those details in the show notes. But it was such a delight to have you on the show.
Thank you, Laura. And you're based East Coast, right?
New York City.
Okay, I'll ship you some meat. I'll follow up. I'm hopping on another Zoom soon, but I will follow up and get you some meats too. You've had the rum, now try the meat.
Well, I'm super excited. Awesome. And thank you. And that is our show.